From secret abilities he was forbidden to use in battle, to what actually went into the creation of his unmistakable growl and furry look. These are all of the things you likely never knew about the eventual pal of the Porgs. Gareth here from What Culture Star Wars, and here are 10 things you didn't know about Chewbacca. Number 10, he was nearly forced to wear a pair of Lederhosen. Before he eventually debuted in A New Hope back in 1977, Chewbacca went through quite a few different looks in the development stage. The great Ralph McQuarrie's early concept art showed off a version of the eventual Wookiee that resembled an unsettling lemur-ape hybrid, with those sketches eventually evolving into a version of the mighty alien that looked like the less terrifying version of Chewbacca fans know and love today. And it was after a star who eventually scored a cameo in The Last Jedi, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, posted some of these early draft images on X that Mark Hamill delivered a fun fact via retweet that initially sounded too surreal to be true. According to the Luke Skywalker superstar, 20th Century Fox execs were a little concerned about Chewie's lack of pants, whilst the team were in the early stages of shooting the first Star Wars. In fact, they were so bothered about a naked Wookiee on screen, they even suggested throwing him into a pair of Lederhosen. So a pair of family members being burned to a crisp was just fine, but a furry alien species wandering around in only a bandolier was oddly a cause for concern for this studio. How strange. Number 9, he has a wife and kid. If you were someone that was only really introduced to the galaxy far, far away in the time after the original trilogy was first released in theaters around the globe, there's a good chance you've never been put through the bizarre experience that is the Star Wars Holiday Special. But if you do ever feel like celebrating Life Day with Chewie and the rest of the gang on Kashyyyk in this weird TV special, then you'll discover that Chewbacca has an entire Wookiee family that has never really been seen on the big screen at any point, and that Chewie's father is a rather horny old man who enjoys VR, experiences. The smuggler/freedom fighter actually has a wife called Mala Tobuk, and the pair also have a son known as Lumpawaru, or Lumpy. And while the pair wouldn't pop up again on screen in the time post-holiday special, Chewie did eventually reunite with his lost son and wife during the liberation of Kashyyyk after the Galactic Civil War, with Lumpy being forced to work in an Imperial labor camp for years when the planet was enslaved by the Empire. And after all that, number 8, he actually retired at one point. That's right, after years of risking it all to smuggle goods across the galaxy and fighting the Empire, this brave rebel hero finally decided to take a step back from living the adventurous life. Not long after helping to liberate his homeworld alongside old pal Han Solo in the Aftermath Life Debt novel, this Wookiee chose to remain with his family on Kashyyyk, leaving his smuggler pal to manage his own shipping company and even oversee a piloting championship known as the Five Sabers at one point. But throughout all of that, Chewie still kept in contact with his longtime mate and his New Republic Senator wife Leia. Retirement isn't for everyone though, and it wasn't too long before Chewbacca was back smuggling for a living with his pal after Han and Leia split in the wake of Ben Solo's fall to the dark side. The two then continued working together right up to the point they bumped into Rey and Finn on the Millennium Falcon during the events of The Force Awakens. Number 7, he had extendable claws but typically didn't use them in battle. More often than not, whenever this big ball of passionate fur was found taking down stormtroopers on the battlefield, his weapon of choice was a rather effective Wookiee bowcaster. What you may not have been aware of, however, is the fact that Chewie actually possessed another somewhat savage tool up his hairy sleeve, one that he was forbidden from using in combat. Despite boasting extendable claws on both hands, using these sharp parts of his anatomy for anything other than climbing was against the rules of the Wookiee Honor Code. And while Chewbacca would largely keep from ever unleashing said claws in the heat of battle, there was actually one moment shortly after Han Solo's tragic death, when the Wookiee did suddenly decide to use his dangerous claws on a First Order stormtrooper. In Chewie's mind, the First Order had zero honor, and Kylo Ren had broken all the rules after committing patricide, so he was only too happy to break the code for these vermin in the moment. Number 6, he once won a Lifetime Achievement Award. For decades, fans had been demanding justice for this valiant rebel hero, in the wake of being snubbed during the medal-giving ceremony that followed Han, Chewie and Luke successfully working together to blow up the first Death Star. And while the Wookiee icon would eventually be handed Solo's medal on screen during the closing stages of the Rise of Skywalker by Maz Kanata, that wasn't actually the first time Chewie got his shaggy hands on a piece of gold. Back in 1997, during the MTV Movie Awards, that year's Lifetime Achievement Award was presented to, according to the host himself, one of the reasons Michael Myers became an actor. A montage showing off the Star Wars legend's finest moments fighting alongside his mates, and roaring his way through many a compelling scene soon followed, with Chewie then going on to finally be awarded the medal he deserved for 2 decades by Carrie Fisher herself, as the crowd went wild. It was a proud and entirely absurd moment for this giant of the industry. Number 5, he's a lot older than you think. Almost 20 years may have passed between the end of Revenge of the Sith and the start of A New Hope, but Chewbacca didn't look like he'd aged a damn day. And Chewie also didn't appear to possess any new grey hairs when he popped back up in The Force Awakens 30 years on from the conclusion of Return of the Jedi. The reason? Wookiees have a massive average lifespan of 400 years. So the entire Skywalker saga timeline, 67 years, only really takes up a small chunk of his overall life, with Chewie actually already being a whopping 200 years old when fans first met him in Episode 4. This also explains why Chewie is able to go so long without seeing his family back home without feeling massively homesick. In Wookiee years, he wasn't really gone that long at all when he was away kicking Imperial/First Order ass throughout the Galactic Civil and First Order Resistance wars. And with Chewie still only being in his mid-200s coming out of the Rise of Skywalker, perhaps he could still show up in the upcoming Daisy Ridley starring Star Wars feature to say hello to his old mate Rey while she's building the Jedi Order too. Number 4, his voice is a combination of multiple animal cries. While the average person hasn't got even the slightest idea what the sharpshooting, tech-savvy Wookiee is talking about the majority of the time, the various growls, cries, roars, and howls that tumble out of Chewbacca's gob are actually more familiar than you realise. Chewbacca's voice was the first thing world-class sound designer Ben Burtt was hired to work on when creating the first Star Wars, and he'd spend a year recording a number of different animals that he'd use to create the iconic noises Wookiees would eventually make when communicating in this galaxy far, far away. Bears, walruses, badgers, lions, and sick and domestic animals were all recorded by Burt in that time, with the designer extracting different moans, grunts, and purring sounds that he felt had emotional feelings connected to them. Burt then ended up with a bunch of different categories of emotional sounds and began cutting those together to get a sense of speech out of Chewie, whilst also trying to land on a sound that felt believable coming out of a mouth that didn't really have articulated lips. So after recording everything from bears to badgers and a great deal of trial and error, the Wookiee way of speaking was born. Number 3, the iconic costume has evolved over the years. Chewie's voice wasn't the only thing that was created with a little help from some of our planet's various creatures. As revealed by the towering star beneath the Wookiee fur during the original trilogy, Revenge of the Sith and The Force Awakens, Peter Mayhew, the suit he would spend a ton of time walking around in on set was actually originally made from a combination of yak hair and mohair, a fabric or yarn made from Angora goat hair. According to the late Mayhew, the suit during those first 3 films was heavy and warm, and the trick was to get in and out of it as quickly as possible. When he ultimately returned to the legendary role for Episode 3 though, he was pleased to find the suit had been given a bit of an upgrade. This time around, the actor was treated to a new costume that was water-cooled and relatively easy to wear. Juna Suotamo, who would step into the role full-time from Episode 8 onwards, would also note how the metal inside the costume was replaced with foam after Episode 7, with the actor also explaining how his jaw is actually very much pushing down Chewie's lower jaw whenever the Wookiee speaks on screen, and that process is pretty tiring. The costume has certainly gotten more comfortable over the years, but it's still often hot and tiring work bringing this furry icon to life, you know. Number 2, George Lucas's dog inspired him to create this Wookiee. A long time ago, in the time when George Lucas was writing the first ever chapter in the galaxy far, far away, the Star Wars creator would often be accompanied by a furry companion of his own. His sweet Alaskan Malamute Indiana, the name that would later be used for another iconic Harrison Ford character, would always be sat next to him whilst he was scribbling away, with the large pooch even sitting in the front seat of his car whenever he went for a drive. And as he'd reveal in an issue of Star Wars Galaxy magazine, having his 130-pound canine with him all the time eventually inspired Lucas to give Han Solo a sidekick who was like a big furry dog. Lucas would swiftly add that this sidekick would not be quite like a dog, but intelligent. Ever wondered what went into naming Solo's best bud too? Well, that was seemingly a case of Lucas just changing a few words around to make Wookiee words, and liking the sound of Chewbacca the best, with the Wookiee species getting their name after the improvised line "I think I just ran over a Wookiee" Terry McGovern uttered in Lucas's THX-1138 film. You never know where inspiration's gonna strike. So now you know. And number 1, he properly died in the expanded universe. Ending things on a rather depressing note, I am sorry. Star Wars Expanded Universe actually went and did what the Rise of Skywalker would only dare tease. 13 years before Disney acquired Lucasfilm in 2012, a novel by the name of The New Jedi Order Vector Prime was published. And it was in this story that Han Solo and Chewbacca ended up on the planet Cernpidal, with that world in danger due to its moon being about to collide with it. However, as the longtime pals attempt to rescue thousands of folks before the moon smashes into Cernpidal, Chewie is soon left on the planet after having to save Han's son, Anakin Solo. It was a different time, during the evacuation, and is actually killed when the moon finally comes crashing down. What? Sure, this heartbreaking death would ultimately be reversed when Disney decided to spend billions on George Lucas's brainchild, but there was definitely a time there when it looked like Chewbacca's days of protecting the galaxy were very much over, with the fallen Wookiee ultimately becoming a legend on his homeworld in the years that followed his heroic sacrifice. And that's our list. Know of any other things people didn't know about Chewbacca? Well, let us know all about them in the comment section right down below, and don't forget to like, share, and click on that subscribe button while you're down there. Also, if you like this sort of stuff, then please head on over to whatculture.com and find some more fantastic Star Wars articles, just like the one this video you're watching right now is based on. I've been Gareth from What Culture Star Wars. May the Force be with you as always. Cheers for blasting in to see us today, and hopefully we'll see you soon.